All right, welcome to our study. We are continuing a look at the theology of Paul, and that is, what did he write about various spiritual and biblical topics. And today I'd like for us to address and to read together a rather lengthy section out of First Corinthians, where Paul is addressing many issues with the church there. And this section begins in chapter 12 of First Corinthians, and it covers three chapters, chapters 12, 13, and 14, on the topic of miraculous spiritual gifts. We'll talk about later some other gifts that are not necessarily miraculous from Romans chapter 12. But let's begin here, where Paul addresses in a rather extensive fashion the use of the spiritual gifts in the first century. And so he said, "Now concerning spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be uninformed." That is, he's addressing what they had asked about. Now concerning, he says that several times in this letter, responding to the letter from the house of Chloe. "You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols. And however you were led, therefore I want you to understand that no one speaking in the Spirit of God can ever say that Jesus is accursed. And no one can say that Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit." Now, he says there are varieties of gifts. That is, there are many different kinds. And he begins to enumerate them. In fact, I have counted 9 here in his list. And he says, but even though there are a variety of gifts, there is but one Spirit. And there are varieties of service, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in every one. And to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. That is, the common good of the church. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, or the word of wisdom. And to another the word of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. Another one faith by the same Spirit. And to another gifts of healings by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish or to discern spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, and to another the interpretation of tongues. All of these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. And so Paul is saying something that they all knew, and that is that there were a variety of gifts. But he is emphasizing, it seems to me, that they should understand that they were all given by one Spirit. They were all empowered by one God, and that there was not to be a division caused by the use of the spirits. No one should exalt one gift above another, as some indeed were at Corinth. And so he gives an analogy here so that it would be clearer to understand in reference to the spiritual gifts. He says in verse 12, "For just as the body is one," that is the human body, "and has many members, and all of the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink in one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. This is a valuable lesson that Paul is presenting here in a very simple way. Just as we have many members in our physical bodies, yet there is but one body, and they should function harmoniously together, so that the body could carry out the activities of life. And so it is with the church. And this is to cause us all to appreciate the fact that we should be working for the common good of the whole body. And yet, there seems always to be a tendency, as it was in Corinth, so it is today, that there will be some who will urge us to participate in the one area of activity that they're participating in and seem comfortable with and maybe be very successful in. And they want us all to stop what we're doing as a hand and just do what the eye is doing, which is not possible at all. We do not all have the same gifts. And so we should be alert to this, to be wise in regard to not focusing our energies in just one direction. But people have various gifts, and they can be very useful to the body for them to flourish in their gift. And I'm not talking about here miraculous spiritual gifts, but rather just activities of the body of the church. Not everyone in the church needs to lead singing. Not everyone needs to be the public speaker. Not everyone needs to take the oversight of the church. That would be disastrous. But rather, we need each one to find their place and to participate in the body for the good of the whole, as Paul said. In verse 21, he says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greater honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that is light, that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care one for another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, then all rejoice together. Now, you are the body of Christ and individually members of it. God has appointed in the church first apostles, and second prophets, third teachers, and then miracles, and then gifts of healing, helps, administrating, and various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? but earnestly rather desire the higher gifts. Some translations say the greater gifts. And I will show you still a more excellent way, which he does in the very next section and our biblical divisions, the next chapter, 13. But once again, notice what he is saying. Are all apostles? Well, no, God appointed only 12. We don't need everyone to be an apostle, to be sent. That's what the word means. And the 12 apostles had a very special role in being eyewitnesses, ear witnesses to the life of Christ and telling us about them. But again, it just seems disturbing in a way that it seems that we can't receive this very simple message that we need the various parts of the body and doing what that part of the body was designed to do. And not only do we not have the ability to do what another member is doing, but that we should not all want to be the same in function, in our place and our role. There's a place for everyone. And the church functions the best when the full scope, the full variety of these gifts are being used. And I'm speaking here both in a non-miraculous sense as well as a miraculous sense, as we'll see later on. But Paul here is addressing the miraculous gifts that were given by the Spirit of God. And in some cases, by the laying on of the apostles' hands. They had the ability to impart gifts to various members. And I want to say before we reach the next two chapters, is that we're talking about here in the first century a very special time period that does not exist now. And that is, we do not have apostles with us. We have others who have the oversight, elders, deacons, teachers, preachers. But we do not have this period in which they had the gifts to guide, to teach the church in the first century, which had only the Old Testament scriptures. With Paul writing these letters to the Corinthians, he was providing what would later become a part of the new covenant. But they did not have it in the full yet, was not yet completed, only had begun. And so during that time period, from the early part of Jesus' ministry when he appointed the 12, all the way through to the time period when there were no apostles, and when the gifts were no longer needed, in fact, not in a miraculous sense, but where we have now the pages of the new covenant. It'd be a very difficult thing to have a covenant without it being recorded, without it being written. People would wonder, what does it mean? What does it say? We need to read it for ourselves. The early church had the Old Testament scriptures, and they told about the coming of Christ, and they preached using those great texts. The Old Testament will always be beneficial and useful. In fact, in Romans 15, Paul said the things that were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. And so we should never think that having the New Testament we can dispense with the Old. Oh no. The two together form an inseparable bond. But that early church had but the Jewish scriptures. And as the first century came to an end, to a conclusion. Those who were eyewitnesses and ear witnesses of the life of Christ now had passed away. But they left us, by inspiration, a record, the pages of the New Covenant. And the development of that itself is extraordinarily valuable to us. And that we now have something that we can look to and find what we need to function as a New Testament church. And so Paul introduces the gifts in this way, and he said, now concerning the things that you wrote about here, I don't want you to be ignorant. I don't want you to be uninformed, as the ESV says. But I want you to know some things about it, and thus he writes these letters. And I might add, at a great cost to Paul and to the church then, so that all might benefit by what was recorded. You'll note as you read the New Testament several times that they will say these things are written for this purpose, and tell us, as John did. These things are written so that you might believe, and believing you might have life through his name. It's so that we might be informed, so that we might be taught concerning the full way of the gospel of Christ. And so Paul introduces and he makes it very clear that he wants the body to function together in harmony. And not for those who have one gift to think that theirs is greater than all the rest. And to remember also that whatever gift we have, we received it. Not something to boast about. And Paul wrote that, in fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. He said, what do you have that you did not receive? And if you received it, why do you boast as if you received it not? If then you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? He said in verse 7, in asking those questions. They should not therefore be boasting about their gifts, but they should be working together that the body might function as it was intended to. And so we'll stop there. But this is Paul's introduction to this important section. And we need to see what he says in this entire section, a rather lengthy section where Paul spent a great deal of energy and time to record what he wanted the church then and now to know concerning these spiritual gifts.